Mark turned into Willow Creek Drive just as the last of the evening light faded into a streak of orange across the horizon. He had been working late again, another exhausting day at the office, and all he wanted was the comfort of home. His little sanctuary tucked knee-yard of the cul-de-sac. Normally, the sight of his silver Ford F-150 waiting patiently in his space made him smile. But tonight, his chest tightened. The space was occupied. At first he thought maybe a visitor had mistakenly pulled in. But no, it wasn't a car parked there, it was worse. A brand new metal sign, bright yellow with black lettering, had been bolted directly into the curb. Resiervidicho property. Beneath it, in smaller print Tau away zone, violators will be fined. Mark slammed his truck into park and climbed out, staring at the sign in disbelief. His boots scuffed the pavement as he walked up, running his fingers along the still warm steel post. Freshly installed. Less than a day old. "You've got to kidding me," he muttered under his breath. From behind him came the deliberating of a throat. Mark turned. A man in a crisp polo shirt, clipboard tucked under his arm, strolled toward him. His name tag. He actually wore a name tag. Read Dale, a compliance officer. V. Veening, Miss Meller. The kind of smile that wasn't a smile at all. "I see you've noticed the new signage. Your truck can't be parked here anymore. Common property, as voted by the HO board last week." Mark blinked at him, stunned. "What the hell are you talking about? This is my spot. Came with the house. I've parked here for 10 years, Dale tesked, scribbling something on his clipboard. "Technically, sir, this portion of the road falls under the association's jurisdiction. The board voted to reclassify this section as shared parking. Residents must now use designated spaces, which, I regret to inform you, do not include this one. If you continue to park here, you'll be subject to fines." Mark's jaw tightened. "That's not your call to make. My deed says otherwise. Deeds change with policy." Dale's tone was oily, practiced, like he'd said this to a dozen people already. "You'll need to relocate your vehicle to the overflow lot by the clubhouse. Plenty of space there. That's 3 blocks away." Mark snapped. "Van unlit at night. My truck's worth more than most of the cars in this neighborhood combined. You expect me to leave it in some dark corner for anyone to break into? Rules are rules," Dale said with a shrug, clearly enjoying himself. He tapped his clipboard. "You're officially notified. First offense is a warning. After that, and repeat violations may result in towing. The HOA takes these matters seriously, Mr. Keller. I suggest compliance." The Mark wanted to argue, to tear that stupid sign right out of the ground and toss it at Dale's smug face. Instead, he forced himself to breathe. Losing his temper now wouldn't fix anything. He swallowed the anger, turned back to his truck, and maneuvered it into his driveway. But that night, sleep didn't come. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, the words "O property" flashing like a neon sign in his mind. The arrogance of it. The sheer audacity to walk up to him, on his land, at his home, and tell him that his rights could be erased with a simple vote. It noted him, dug deep of the part of his brain that refused to let go of a fight once it had started. Finally, at 2 in the morning, Mark climbed out of bed and padded barefoot down to the garage. There, tucked on a high shelf, dust-coated the top, a testament to how long it had been since he'd opened it. Inside, neatly stacked, were the documents he had inherited when he purchased the house. Not just the deed, but old plats, surveys, even original developer filings from when the neighborhood was first constructed decades ago. He spread them across his workbench under the cold glow of a single hanging bulb. His eyes scanned line after line, tracing boundary markers, cross-street measurements, rights of way. The hours bled together until finally, with a low whistle, he sat back in his chair. There it was, clear as day. The forgotten clause buried in the original PAC ownership of the road itself. The cul-de-sac, the pavement, even the sidewalk. All of it was deeded to the lot he had purchased, not the HOA, not common property. Him. Mark leaned back, heart pounding. The implications washed over him like a tide. For years, he had assumed the HOA had some say over things like paint colors, mailbox styles, lawn length. Annoying, but tolerable. What he hadn't realized, what they apparently hadn't realized either, was that their entire Willow Creek rested on borrowed ground. Literally. The street wasn't theirs, it was his. Every car parked along it. Every sign hammered into it, every claim they made was sitting on property they didn't own. Mark let out a low laugh, sharp and humorless. All the smugness of Dale's clipboard threats replayed in his head, and suddenly they seemed ridiculous. The HO could vote all they wanted, print all the policies they liked, but it meant nothing. The law was on his side. He shuffled the documents back into the box, locking it with a satisfying click. His exhaustion was gone, replaced by a clarity sharper than any coffee could give him. They had declared war over a parking space, and in doing so, they had handed him the perfect weapon. As dawn's first light crept through the blinds, Mark stood at the garage door and looked out at the shiny new yellow sign. It no longer filled him with anger. Now was just a marker of their ignorance, a countdown clock ticking toward their downfall. He whispered to himself, almost smiling. You stole my spot. Too bad I own the damn road. And for the first time since he'd pulled into the cul-de-sac, he felt like he'd already won. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of cut grass and fresh asphalt. Mark stepped out of his house with a briefcase in one hand, coffee in the other. He had slept little, but the lack of rest was hidden beneath the charge of adrenaline coursing through him. Today was the day he would turn the tables. Across the street, a folding table had been set up beneath a pop-up canopy. The HOA board had gathered, dressed in their coordinated polo shirts and smug expressions, sipping coffee as if they were generals about to discuss strategy. Dale, clipboard tucked neatly under his arm, spotted Mark approaching and muttered something to the group. They chuckled. Mr. Keller, Dale called out, voice oily with false cheer. Come to lodge your complaint. You'll need to submit it in writing. In triplicate, actually. Rules are rules, you know. The others laughed at his little joke, and one of them even clapped. Mark set his briefcase on the table with a heavy thunk. The sound turned heads. He unlatched the locks, flipped it open, and began laying out papers one by one. Deeds. Surveys. Plat maps signed decades ago. The chatter around the table faltered. If I'm not here to complain, Mark said, voice calm, steady. If I'm here to inform you that everything you did this past week is null and void, that sign you planted. Illegal. That vote you held. Meaningless. He spread the papers like a dealer laying out a winning hand. Because this road, this entire cul-de-sac silence that a property. It's mine. The silence that followed was delicious. For a moment, all Mark heard was the soft hum of distant traffic. Then, the HOA president, a red-faced man named Richard, forward and squinted at the documents. That's impossible, he sputtered. The HOA owns common areas. Streets, sidewalks, landscaping. It's in our charter. Mark tapped the old survey with one finger. Your charter doesn't override recorded deeds. These plats were filed with the county when this neighborhood was built. Lot 17. My lot includes the road and right-of-way all the way to the cul-de-sac. That's not association property. That's private property. My private property. Dale snatched one of the pages, scanning it like he could will the words to change. His lips moved silently, eyes darting across the lines. He slammed it back down. This doesn't make sense. No one owns roads individually. They're either city property or association property. Except when they're not, Mark countered. The developer deeded this road to my lot when they dissolved the construction company. The city never accepted it as a municipal street, which means every time you've held your little board meetings and acted like you controlled this block, you've been trespassing. Every sign, every fine, every threat, done on land that doesn't belong to you. The smug confidence around the table cracked. Board members exchanged nervous glances, whispering among themselves. Richard's face darkened, a vein in his temple pulsing. Even if that were true, you can't just declare our decisions invalid. That's not how it works. Mark smiled, slow and sharp. Watch me. As the legal owner of this road, I hereby declare unbuildable. No HO projects. No new signage, no reclassification of parking. If you want to park here, you'll be leasing from me. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice just enough to make them strain to hear. And leases don't come cheap. The weight of his words settled like a thunderclap. One of the board members, a thin woman with glasses, muttered, he's bluffing. He has to be bluffing. But her voice wavered. Mark pulled out the trump card, a certified letter he had already prepared, addressed to the county clerk's office. He slid it across the table. This is my notice of enforcement. Once it's filed, every one of you will be barred from altering so much as a crack in this asphalt without my written consent. You think the HOA's insurance covers liability here? It doesn't. It's whose does? Mine. You've been playing landlord on a property you don't own, and that ends today. The color drained from Richard's face. Dale's mouth opened and closed like a fish, searching for words. The board was unraveling in real time, their authority collapsing under the weight of a truth none of them had ever considered. Mark picked up the papers, slid them back into his briefcase, and snapped it shut. I'll give you until the end of the week to remove those signs and issue a formal retraction to the neighborhood. If you don't, I'll file trespassing charges against every single one of you. Then we'll see how much your neighbors appreciate footing the bill for your legal defense. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the rustling of leaves in the morning breeze. Then, slowly Mark walked back toward his truck. He opened the door, slid inside, and with deliberate ease, parked of the HOA had tried to steal. The tires rolled over the painted curb, the metal sign casting a useless shadow across the hood. He leaned back in the seat, watching the board through his windshield. They weren't laughing anymore. They weren't sipping coffee or cracking jokes. They were huddled together, whispering furiously, their little empire of authority crumbling like sand in a storm. Mark rested one arm on the window, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. For years, he had tolerated their petty rules, their nitpicking letters about lawn length and mailbox paint. But the moment they came for what was his, they had made the worst mistake of their lives. The cul-de-sac was quiet now, quieter than it had been in years. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, watching, sensing that something had shifted. A power they had all lived under unquestioned was suddenly fragile, breakable. And Mark knew it wasn't just about the parking spot anymore. He had proven something far bigger. The HOA wasn't untouchable. Not here. Not on his road. As the board members dispersed, pale and shaken, Mark whispered under his breath, almost to himself, "Next time you steal my spot, remember who owns the ground you're standing on." And for the first time in a long time, he felt the street truly belonged to him.